Draft season is over? Almost, but we're going to squeak another week out of it here on your draft season podcast. John Schmelk, Tony Pauline with you. The 2023 NFL draft is in the books, but we still have to react to it. You'll have this podcast in a couple of days coming your way on Tuesday. We'll have our full team-by-team draft review, and then we'll have the following week on a Monday, our look ahead to the top seniors, primarily heading into the 2024 NFL draft. And that's going to be old Tony, folks, because he knows these guys. I do not. So I will rely on Tony. Yeah, look nervous, Tony. You should be. So we should be ready to go. Just to kind of give a sneak peek. If you want to watch some tape over the summer, Tony will give you some guys you should go put your eyes on heading into the 2024 college football season. Tony, last few days have been a grind, probably a little more so for you than for me, though I'm as tired as can be. Overall thoughts as this journey in 2023 is at an end before we start this thing all over again.
So a few big names fell down the board. I'm sure we'll get into the reasons why, or we'll get into those names at least. Couple of surprise picks, guys that, have come out of nowhere, especially on day three. I think some teams did exceptionally well. I think some teams, were slightly disappointing on paper anyway. We'll have to wait and see what happens. It's interesting, and maybe it's me, but I haven't seen a lot of trades this year for picks next year, which is what I thought I would see, because next year's draft looks like it's going to be so much more loaded compared to this year, where it was kind of slimmed down because of so many seniors going back for a second senior season, so many underclassmen staying in school with the NIL deals. I expected to see a lot more teams give away picks this year for better picks in 2024. I did not see that.
Yeah, I think the Eagles made one or two of those trades, right, where they traded picks from next year's draft, I think. But other than that, you're right. There have not been a lot of them. All right. So I kind of came – go ahead, Tony. I'm sorry.
That's okay. A team like the Eagles, a team like the Chiefs, they have all these picks, but they don't have too much room on their depth chart. So, what happens is if they use all the picks, they're not going to be able to fit the guys on their roster. So, in essence, they may be drafting for other teams because other teams will pick up those players and put them on their roster. So the Eagles, I could understand that because the Eagles want to keep moving it down the road so that when they need those selections, they'll be there to fill holes on their roster.
Yeah, the Eagles traded, I believe, a third-round pick for next year to select Ringo at the top of the fourth round. So just a couple things that went down. All right, so I came up with a list of superlatives. Tony and I will kind of go back and forth here. Favorite day 2 or 3 picks here, Tony. If you want to go by the way, and listen to our take on the first round, that's the previous episode on this podcast feed, draft season. Go check that out. I'll go first here, Tony. Favorite day 2 picks. And look, I think this is low-hanging fruit, but I'll take it anyway. And that's the Lions with Brian Branch. I think for a team that was just trying to get better on defense, they got him about 10 picks into round number 2. I thought he's a ready walk-in starting safety / slot corner. I think he's a really good football player. And to grab him off the board at pick number 45, I thought was a really nice move by Detroit that'll really help their defense, which, wasn't the best last year. So I thought that was an excellent day 2 value for the Lions.
I agree. And he was one of the names that I had there. I've got a bunch of names. I think Cedric Tillman in the 3rd round, I believe for the Browns, was exceptional value. I mean, he is an outstanding pass catcher. He plays the position like a linebacker, very reliable hands, solid route runner, not a downfield threat, but a guy who just has a great feel for what's happening on the field. As I always say, if you ever watch Cedric Tillman, don't just watch his catches. Watch what happens when he's away from the ball, because he will attack opponents. Right off the line of scrimmage, he attacks and looks to intimidate defensive backs. I thought the Giants, I think they were probably doing somersaults in the war room when John Michael Schmitz was there in the 2nd round, and they were able to select him because I think he was somebody that they were considering in round 1. They have a big hole at center. Of all the centers in this year's draft, John Michael Schmitz is probably the most NFL ready. He's the guy that's going to start the quickest. He's a Giants type of center. He's smart. He's tough. He's strong. He's relatively athletic. I thought that was a great pick.
And Tony, by the way, cartwheels in round 3 too, when they just traded up and they managed to get Jalen Hyatt in round 3 to fit their speed wide receiver need. They had to move their 4th round pick to do it. But I think to get a guy like Hyatt, who most people had, top of round 2, some people I know had him in the first round too, maybe not you or I, but I thought that was phenomenal value in round 3 for the Giants.
Yeah, and you know what, Jalen Hyatt, you can poke holes in his game, and I think that's legitimate. Doesn't have an extended route tree, didn't run as fast at the combine as many expected, especially for the vertical threat that we all saw him to be last year at Tennessee. But to get him in the 3rd round, especially when the Giants are looking for a guy to stretch the field, that was terrific value. I thought that DJ Turner, the Bengals taking him late in the 2nd round. They need a corner. He's a slot corner. In my opinion, he's an underrated corner. He's also someone that they considered in round 1. They get him in round 2. And then the Eagles, who I'm sure we're talking about, taking Sidney Brown where they did, I thought was phenomenal of value. I mean, they needed a safety. He's not the tallest guy. He was a terrific player at Illinois. You and I were both there for 3 days of Senior Bowl practice. We saw what he was able to do, not just the toughness, but the cover skills, the ball skills, and the one-on-one drills. I thought that was a magnificent pick by the Eagles.
No, I'm with you, Tony. I'll throw out a couple more names and we'll move on here. And I'll go to day 3 here. I thought, Kelee Ringo at the top of round 4. And again, you could poke holes in his games, but I think, that athletic profile to get at the top of round 4, I think you sign up for that. Then you take a look at Adebawore, who I can't believe he lasted to round 4. I would even understand round 3 to an extent, but for the Colts to get him to pick 110, I thought was phenomenal value. And then I'm more of a fan of this guy than others, I think, but I thought Charlie Jones as a guy who can step in and eventually replace Tyler Boyd as the Bengals slot receiver, as they eventually will have to make tough decisions in terms of their payroll, given they're going to have to pay Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, maybe even T. Higgins outside. I think Charlie Jones is a great slot complement that could eventually step in there for Tyler Boyd.
I thought the Colts made 3 great picks on day 3. Adebawore, who you talked about, and I reached out, why did he fall into the 4th round? And I was told, well, he's sort of a tweener. Is he defensive end? Is he defensive tackle? We saw him play both positions with incredible success during the Senior Bowl. So I thought they got great value there. Blake Freeman, who they got in the 4th round, and Darius Rush, who they got in the 5th round. Now, these are guys with great upside, but they took a project at quarterback with the 4th selection of the draft. So this may not have immediate returns for the Indianapolis Colts, as most fans like to see, but 2 or 3 years down the line, when Blake Freeman really starts to develop as a real good tackle, Darius Rush, who made the conversion over from receiver, really starts to refine his game. Maybe Anthony Richardson and Adebawore, they find a place for him. I think, I thought the Colts killed it on day 3. I thought the Falcons taking Clark Phillips, in the 4th round was a terrific selection. We were wondering, were they going to take a cornerback with that 8th pick after making that trade for Jeffrey Okudah? Obviously, they didn't go cornerback early. They come back in the 4th round and get a guy who's an outstanding cover corner, can play in the slot. The only problem is he's 5'8", but so what? And I thought Noah Sewell to the Bears in the 5th round was an exceptional pick. I mean, not the fastest guy in the world, but very instinctive, plays assignment football, and a real tough linebacker.
And I'll throw one other name out there. Pardon me, Tony. A.T. Perry getting all the way to pick 195 for the Saints. I thought that was tremendous value to add to their wide receiver core. All right, now we're going to best and either strangest fits. We can take it any way you want. And my first one I'll throw to you, Tony, is a little bit of both. So maybe I'll save that one for the end. I'll throw a couple others at you that I really liked. Love Keion White to the Patriots. It's just your classic Patriot power end, right? They like big ends that can, just muscle people with their length and power. Well, Keion White fits that to a T. I thought that was a great fit for what they like to do. Steelers, Keanu Benton, a 2-way interior defensive lineman that's quick and powerful. I think he fits with the Pittsburgh Steeler type of mentality. You already mentioned Sidney Brown, so I won't spend much time on him. I thought Kendre Miller to the Saints, really nice compliment to Alvin Kamara, who might be suspended this year as well. I think he's going to be a valuable player for them. Tyjae Spears, great change of pace back to Derrick Henry in Tennessee as a guy that can work out of the backfield and use speed and quickness. And then I thought Devon Achane to Miami. What does their head coach want? They want fast running backs. So what do? You pick the fastest running back in the draft. I thought those were just really great fits. And then you give yours, and then I'll kind of give my transition to strangest fits.
I'm going to go back to the Patriots. I thought Christian Gonzalez trading down and Christian Gonzalez still being there. I think Belichick works wonders with set players in the secondary, especially cornerbacks. And I think this will be the next one because he was the number one cornerback on my board. He falls into the middle of round one, and Belichick and the Patriots swipe him up.
If there's anyone that you want teaching a guy that's talented DB technique, is Bill Belichick and his staff. Perfect fit.
I think Sam Laporta to the Detroit Lions.
Love it.
They needed a tight end. We thought maybe they would take a tight end at 18. They get a guy in the second round who some people thought, was a potential late first round choice, but was selected before Michael Mayer, if you remember. And the fact is this, Laporta's been a real good tight end at Iowa for 3 years. He's not a one-year wonder. I think Dan Campbell, he's absolutely going to love Laporta with his playing style, an intense player, guy who's a solid blocker and can get down the field as a pass catcher. I also like Cody Mauch to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the reason is this. You look at Tampa Bay, they have had incredible success developing small school offensive linemen. You go through their history, and they just do a great job with these small school offensive linemen. Now you bring in Mauch, maybe a tackle, could play guard. Maybe he's your center of the future. They got a bunch of needs on that offensive line. Obviously, Mauch's not going to play all of them at once, but he's a versatile guy. And again, I go back to the history of that organization and the success that they have had with those small school offensive linemen. I thought that was a great fit.
All right, now I'm going to do my transition because when the Packers drafted Luke Musgrave, I'm like, oh, great fit. Athletic tight end, give your quarterback a weapon in the middle of the field. He can run, he can catch. I'm like, great fit. And then, like a round later, they drafted Tucker Kraft too. And I'm like, I know maybe you run a lot of 12 personnel, but then they also drafted Jaden Reed, a wide receiver, and they have Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs. So all those young guys can't all play, Tony. Like, they just can't all be on the field at the same time. So while I love the Musgrave pick when it happened, after they made their other moves for the Packers, I'm like, well, who's the odd man out in their young receiving core? So I thought that was a little bit weird. I do not understand at all the decision for Denver to draft Marvin Mims. You look at that depth chart of wide receiver. They've been trying to trade one of these guys. They have Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick coming off an injury, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, Marquez Callaway. Then you add Marvin Mims on top of that. I'm not sure how he's going to get on the field for Sean Payne. I understand it's a new coach and all that stuff. I just thought that was a little bit of a weird fit. And then the last team I'll go for, and look, it's a classic Seahawk move. Yeah, and I get that, and I shouldn't have been surprised. But Kenneth Walker III is awesome. He's a really good player. And they drafted him last year in the second round. And he can play all three downs. So what do they do this year? They draft a guy that's pretty darn good in the second round that can play all three downs in Zach Charbonnet. I know their styles are a little bit different, but why would you do that?
Listen, that was my number one, questionable pick, questionable fit. I love Zach Charbonnet.
No, me too. He's a good player.
Last night, it's not even a complimentary back. I mean, they're the same type of running backs. You could talk about a rotational system, and that's fine, because they're going to last longer. But, I didn't understand it. And I love Charbonnet. They're basically similar types of ball carriers, although Charbonnet's a much better pass catcher in the backfield. I thought that the Miami Dolphins taking Cam Smith with what was their first pick in the second round, with all the moves that they have made, and the fact that Cam Smith is a high maintenance type of guy, to me, that just didn't seem. It seemed kind of strange to bring a guy like that and with Jalen Samuels there after the trade for him, and you basically have a loaded group of cornerbacks, and here's Cam Smith, who needs a lot of development on his game. I thought that pick, especially with their needs at tight end, would have been better suited elsewhere for Miami.
All right, now let's go to guys that were surprise fallers, that we were kind of surprised they lasted as long as they did in this draft. And Tony, I'm going to go to round 3 here, and a couple guys really stick out like sore thumbs to me when I take a look at what happened here in round number 3. And this is a guy that I like probably more than other people, so I'll take a hit on probably being too high in the guy. But the Colts getting, and I'm going to mention the Colts again later with one of my favorite classes, getting Josh Downs at pick 79. I didn't see that much distance between him and Zay Flowers, to be honest with you. Flowers had more down the field capability, I thought, to get over the top, but I thought Downs was excellent. I mean, I don't think you could get better value than that at pick 79 in round number 3. I thought Drew Sanders dropping to the 3rd round for the Broncos as a combo kind of linebacker pass rusher was a really, really good value. You mentioned Christian Gonzalez. I think that was a good point. Osiris Torrance, I thought, dropped a little bit into the 2nd round. We talked about DeJuan Jones. I thought his tape was excellent, but his post-draft process was not. He dropped all the way to round 4, I think, right, Tony? So that was a guy that I thought dropped a little bit further than his tape probably deserved. And then, A.T. Perry, who I mentioned earlier, going all the way to pick 195. And then Luke Whippler, I thought lasted way too long, too. I thought he should have been an earlier pick, and I don't think he got picked until round 5. So those are the guys for me that I was kind of surprised lasted as long as they did.
I think actually Whippler came off around 6, I believe.
Yeah, even crazier.
If you're going to take the hit on Josh Downs, I should get beat up for Luke Whippler because, I sang his praises. Now, why did he fall? I asked people and they said, well, number one, he's got short arms. His arms were like 31 and a half inches. Number 2, he's undersized. But the big thing is teams solely see him as a center, not a center guard combo. And that really hurt him. The other guys who I was concerned that I was surprised, Owen Popo fell into the 5th round. Speedy ran 4.39 at the combine. A guy who was a great pursuit linebacker, goes sideline to sideline. I understand he's a little bit small. I understand he gets caught up in the traffic, but still, I mean, someone who gets from point A to point B in a flash and can play special teams. I was surprised that Henry To'o went as early as he did. I mean, coming into the season, To'o was rated as a potential top 45 pick by scouts. He didn't have a bad year. I know he didn't test off the charts, but I thought he was worth a day 2 selection. And as we tape this, Eli Ricks is yet to be selected in the draft. There were a lot of people, not me, who thought that Eli Ricks was a potential 1st round choice. I had him as a 3rd rounder, but the fact is this, he's got a very limited body of work. I think he started, 24 games in the past 3 years between Alabama and LSU. Pro Day, he ran a 4.55 and a 4.65. It's turning out to be a very bad choice to enter the draft, Eli Ricks, which I said at the time I thought he should have gone back. I think we also got to talk a little bit about Kayshon Boutte. I mean, Boutte we knew had the potential to fall, and Boutte did exactly that. He fell much deeper than anybody thought in the draft.
100% with you, Tony. Now, surprise risers that I think maybe a little bit too rich based on their talent. Again, this is not a knock at the players, just a kind of surprise as to where they went. The Saints, Isaiah Foskey at 40th overall. I know he's a Saints type of player. He's a bigger edge player. He just didn't have enough juice to me to be selected at 40 ahead of a guy like BJ Ojulari, ahead of a guy like Keon White, ahead of a guy like Keanu Benton. I mean, I see that and I just don't quite understand it. So he went a little early for my taste. I was surprised that Byron Young, Alabama, went before Byron Young, Tennessee. I thought those two guys would have been reversed. I thought that was a funny play right there. And then the other guy, and again, who I think would have been a good developmental player, picked a little bit later. But I was surprised that Juice Scruggs went as early as he did to Houston at 62 overall at the end of the 2nd round. I thought he was more of I thought Whippler was going to go before him in the draft, and Scruggs went 4 rounds before Whippler did. So that one caught me by surprise a little bit too.
See, the thing with Scruggs is can play guard or center. So that was the appeal with Scruggs. Played well at the Shrine Game. Was actually a very good player at Penn State. I thought maybe late 3rd, 4th. I thought the 2nd was a little bit early, but I had reported before day 2 that he was moving up draft boards. I'm going to go with some of the later round guys. Kobe Turner of Wake Forest, who I thought was maybe a 6th, 7th round choice. He goes in the 3rd round. Broderick Martin of Western Kentucky, who I didn't even have as a draftable prospect. He ends up as a 3rd round pick to the Detroit Lions. I mean, he's a zero technique, nose tackle type of guy with some athleticism. Just never jumped off the film to me. Had his moments, but was once in a blue moon. And then Sean Clifford of Penn State going in the 5th round to the Packers. You might talk about the Packers before. I mean, Clifford, good story. tough quarterback, a great career at Penn State. I just don't think he projects all that well. I didn't have a draftable grade on him. The Packers take him in the 5th round.
Yeah, I agree. I thought I was surprised by that as well. All right, Tony, now let's go to the guys we think, based on their talent and skill set and where they wind up, guys that we think can make an immediate impact on their team. So I'll start here. We can kind of go back and forth here one at a time if you want. And I don't see how you don't start with Jalen Carter, who I think just goes to a perfect spot for him. He obviously, in both our opinion, is the most talented player in this draft class. And he goes to a place in Philadelphia where he's got a bunch of Georgia Bulldogs there to help him along. They do have Nolan Smith. They have Nakobe Dean there from last year. They have Jordan Davis there from last year. But also, like, Fletcher Cox is not going to let him get away with loafing. Brandon Graham is not going to let him get away with loafing. This is a championship team with championship habits. And I don't think you can find a better fit for Jalen Carter. And whatever role they put him in, Tony, he's going to come in right away, and he is going to be a disruptive force in the middle of that Eagles defensive line with all that talent around him. That is an immediate day one impact, no doubt about it.
I'm going to go start off with Paris Johnson of the Arizona Cardinals by way of Ohio State. I mean, here's a guy who made the seamless transition from guard to left tackle. Basically improved seemingly as the weeks went on last season. Had a good combine, was phenomenal during his pro day, has got a tremendous amount of upside. I think they're going to start him quickly because they need a left tackle. You got to protect Kyler Murray. I just like the trajectory of his game, and he's got great size. He's got great athleticism. There are some things that he's got to just smooth out. He's got to really be more confident in his base and use his base better in pass protection. But he's athletic. He's strong. He can hold the point on the line of scrimmage. He can get on the second level. And obviously, there's a desperate need there at left tackle for the Arizona Cardinals, which is why they traded down and then they traded back up to get Paris Johnson.
All right, my next guy is going to be Dalton Kincaid, Tony, with the Buffalo Bills. And I understand, not the most experience in college. I get that. But to get into that offense where you have Stephon Diggs there, you have Josh Allen there. You have a good offensive staff that knows how to put an offense together. I think he's going to step in. He'll play some tight end there. But remember, Dawson Knox is there as a good inline tight end. Dalton Kincaid might have the TE next to his name, but he is going to be a move tight end for them that is going to be as much of a receiver as he is a tight end, in my opinion, at least early on in his career until he learns the blocking part of the game. And he has perhaps the best natural receiver skills in this draft that includes the wide receivers. I think he's going to step in as a receiver. Again, I think the other tight end stuff will come along a little bit more slowly, but as a receiver, Dalton Kincaid is going to come in and really help that Bills offense in the middle of the field right away.
I'm going to go with Jack Campbell. I know he was drafted much earlier than anybody thought. There was some late first-round grades on him. And there were some who liked Drew Sanders better. I always had Campbell rated number one in that clump of linebackers. Campbell, Sanders, Trent Simpson. Campbell's always been my number one guy. He's smart, relatively athletic. He's got a great frame, moves around the field. I love his instincts. I love his toughness. He fires up the field on the blitz when he has to. He remains disciplined with his cover assignments. He gets out in space to make plays. I just like his overall game, and with their need at linebacker and the fact that they took him with the 18th pick, they're going to have to justify taking him that early. I think he's going to see the field early, and I like Jack Campbell. I just like his overall game. I don't know, he's got great upside, but he's very polished and he's very NFL ready.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Jackson Smith-Njigba. You talk about a polished route runner.
Hey.
I think Jackson Smith-Njigba is it, and he's going to go to Seattle, Tony, where you're already paying attention to DK Metcalf. You're already paying attention to Tyler Lockett. You're already paying attention to both their 3-down running backs that somehow they'll figure out a way to use both of them at the same time. You have 2 rookie offensive tackles there. Geno Smith had a nice little second year. I think he's going to step in there as part of that 3-headed monster at wide receiver, and he's going to be pretty darn good early, not having to be that number one target in the offense. I think he complements Lockett and Metcalf extremely well.
Oh, you stole mine because I was going to go with Jackson Smith-Njigba. I'm going to go back to what I talked about earlier. I'm going to go John Michael Schmitz. I mean, the Giants need a center. John Michael Schmitz is very polished. He's NFL ready. If he's not starting, the week after Labor Day, week 1, I think John Michael Schmitz will be starting at least by the beginning of October. He's a tough guy. He's an instinctive guy. He fits the giant mold. They've and throughout their history, they've liked those Big Ten offensive linemen. John Michael Schmitz has got on. I talked about how they were doing somersaults in the war room. I was actually quite happy because I did 3 mock drafts this year, and I had them taking John Michael Schmitz in the first round of all those 3 mock drafts. Maybe I was off by a round, but I knew they liked the player. I think he's going to have an immediate impact, and they're going to need him to. I mean, just gave all that money to Daniel Jones. Maybe they, we'll see what happens with Saquon Barkley. That offense has got to take the next step, and it's going to be reliant on the center position.
Yeah, final one for me, Tony. I'm going to go with one of your guys, Mazi Smith, who I think will step in. And even though he's not there yet as a pass rusher, and much like with Campbell, I thought he got picked a little bit earlier than maybe he should have by the Cowboys, but they need a run stopper in the middle of that defensive line. And that's one thing, with his strength and size, that he's going to be able to step in there right away and help with their run defense. So that'll be the last guy I throw out there that I think in that specific role. And again, you can talk about value at that spot for a player of that caliber and all that stuff. I get that argument, and I actually support a lot of them. But for what they want him to do, stop the run, I think he's going to step in right away and be one of those immovable objects in the middle of that Cowboys defense.
I'm going to go back to a guy that you mentioned was a real good fit. I'm going to say Keion White of the New England Patriots, because I think he's a good fit for the system. He's very athletic. I mean, Keion White can go one of two ways. He didn't play a lot of football up until last season, and then he looked explosive, and then he had a good Senior Bowl. Or, he's going to revert back to a guy that, was spotty or was injured. I'm going to go with the former because I like the athlete. I like the player. He's got good size. He's got growth potential. He's got a lot of upside. And again, I think he's a terrific fit for that system. And as you mentioned, that's what the Patriots use. And that's the type of lineman the Patriots like. I think Keion White's going to be a beneficiary of it.
All right, let's go to quarterback fits, Tony. And I think Hendon Hooker to the lines is wonderful. Jared Goff's got 2 years left on his contract. Hooker, I think he's a good athlete, but he's also a pocket passer. So he can sit there, heal the ACL, learn the system. They'll see him for 2 years by the time they need to make a decision on Goff. So, and then getting him in the 3rd round on top of that, I never thought he was a 1st-round player. Other people had him mocked up there, and they thought he was. But to me, I think for where the Lions are as a franchise, he's the perfect developmental quarterback behind Goff in terms of, developmental structure, in terms of the years it'll take in the timeline. I think Hooker to Detroit is just an excellent fit.
And if they put him on the non-football injury list this year, they're basically going to have him for 5 years. So I would agree with you. He was one of the 3 that I picked. I like Aiden O'Connell to the Las Vegas Raiders. I mean, O'Connell's a guy. He's mature. He's very smart. He's a good game manager. He's got a decent arm, and he's going to sit behind Jimmy Garoppolo for at least a year. They can get out of the Garoppolo's contract after a year if they believe in Aiden O'Connell. People have told me throughout the process that they believe that Aiden O'Connell could turn out to be one of the best, if not one of the better, if not best quarterbacks from this year's draft. And the fact that like Hendon Hooker, he's not going to have to play for a year. And he was taken, in the 4th round, late in the 4th round. You're not going to expect much from him, but he's got a high upside. He's what you want in a quarterback. He's a very mature, he's a leader, and he's got good physical skills. You talked about Charlie Jones before. Charlie Jones benefited from Aiden O'Connell throwing the ball downfield to him.
All right, do you want to give your second quarterback fit before we move on to the next one?
This is easy. It would be Bryce Young. I mean, it was kind of, maybe it was a lazy one, but
if it fits, it fits.
Frank Reich there. Frank Reich is going to want to do a lot of different things on the offense. And as we talked about, throughout the process in the lead up to the draft, Bryce Young was being characterized as a genius. The intellect that we saw on the football field, the clairvoyance that we saw on the football field was transferred over during those one-on-one meetings. I think Frank Reich is going to be able to do a lot of things with Bryce Young. The one thing that the Carolina Panthers are going to have to do is protect him because of the size.
No question. All right. Favorite trades, I'll go really fast here, Tony, because I already mentioned both of them. I thought the Hyatt trade up for the Giants in round 3, it cost him a 4th-round pick, but I think it was worth the bang for the buck there. And then I thought the Eagles trading up for Ringo was also a really good pick there. And I also like the Lions and the way they traded down to accumulate more draft capital. They clearly did not see a player there they liked after Weatherspoon went off the board at 6. I like the extra picks they acquired later on in the draft. I thought that was effective. I'm surprised they didn't pick a cornerback a little bit earlier in the draft, to be honest with you, but that's okay. I thought I liked just the fact that the Lions moved back in that spot and picked up those extra picks. I thought that was a good deal.
And really, the only trade that I had was the Arizona Cardinal trade, because they traded down to what was it, 12 or whatever it was. They traded down, right? Traded down to 12 to Houston, and they get all those draft picks, and then they move back up to get the left tackle. So I've always been a left tackle guy. I thought that was a terrific trade. They got the left tackle of the future, and even though they gave away some capital to move back up to get to number 6, they still came away winners, and they still came away with more picks.
All right, now let's go through our favorite classes, Tony. We can try to go through these relatively quickly because we'll do our full class breakdown for each team coming your way here on Tuesday on our usual draft season day on our draft season feed. But as much as it pains me with all this blue, white, and red around me here for the Giants, how do you not love what the Eagles did in this draft? My goodness gracious. Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Sidney Brown, Kelee Ringo, Tyler Steen, and even Tanner McKee as a developmental quarterback. I thought Howie Roseman knocked this out of the park. I thought he had a great draft, and they just keep stocking up the front and back end of their defense and offensive line. And boy, I thought the Eagles, it was just the rich getting richer with the way their draft went.
For the second year in a row. And it's kind of funny because if you remember when Chip Kelly went to the Eagles, everybody was saying, well, is this going to be Oregon East? Is he going to draft all these guys from Oregon? And it's almost like the past couple of years, especially this year, you wonder if Howie Roseman's got a summer house in Athens, Georgia. Because he went to the well, Georgia, time and time again, as he did last year with the first pick with Jordan Davis. So, I would agree with you. I thought the Cleveland Browns, despite the fact that they didn't start picking until their first pick wasn't until the 74th selection in the 3rd round, I thought they did an outstanding job. Cedric Tillman, who I mentioned earlier, Siaka Ika in the 3rd round, DeJuan Jones in the 4th round, Isaiah McGuire in the 4th round, Dorian Thompson-Robinson in the 5th round, Luke Whippler in the 6th round. I mean, these are all guys who, Dorian Thompson-Robinson is going to be a developmental guy, especially with Watson there and the money they're paying him. They also got Cameron Mitchell in the 5th round. All these guys are going to make the roster. I think Tillman's going to play a lot. Ika's going to play a lot. DeJuan Jones, if he gets his act together, can be a starting right tackle there. Isaiah McGuire, they need another edge rusher on the other side from Myles Garrett. Luke Whippler, I mean, he gets a little bit stronger. I thought that they didn't have a 1st-round pick, which everybody focused on. They didn't have a 2nd-round pick. Their draft basically started in the 3rd round. I thought the Browns did a phenomenal job.
Yeah, I'm staying in Ohio, Tony. I love the Bengals draft. They got Miles Murphy at pick 28, good value. DJ Turner, pick 29, 60 overall in round 2, excellent value. Jordan Battle, solid safety in round 3. I love the Charlie Jones pick in round 4. He's one of my guys. I've talked about him all year. Chase Brown, the running back of Illinois, another one of my guys in round 5. I think he could be a guy. He'll be a good backup for Joe Mixon, maybe even an eventual replacement. Andre Yeshevis from Princeton, the wide receiver, good developmental wideout. I thought that was a nice pick. I thought the Bengals had a really, really nice weekend.
The only thing about the Bengals is, and they may still do it, I wish they had come away with a tight end that they need in a tight end rich draft. That was
and by the way, Tony, also an offensive tackle. I thought they could have used a tackle too. So I agree. I think those are 2 spots where they could have drafted someone, but I think the talent they got was phenomenal.
I thought that the Chicago Bears did exceptionally well. I mean, they make that trade with Philadelphia, they get an extra pick, and then they take Darnell Wright. They're a tackle needy team. You got to protect Justin Fields. And granted, Darnell Wright's a right tackle, not a left tackle, but he still improves the offensive line. I thought Gervin Dexter in late in round 2 was a real good pick. I love his upside. Tyreek Stevenson, they needed a cornerback again, a guy that's got great upside. Zach Pickens in round 3, I thought that's exactly where I wanted him to go. And I think Zach Pickens is incredibly underrated. Rashawn Johnson is a terrific 3 down back as a pass catcher, ball carrier, and blocker. Tyler Scott in the 4th round. That's the field stretcher. I mentioned Noah Sewell before. Terrell Smith is a developmental cornerback, a guy who's really just scratching the surface in the 5th round. I thought the Bears did a phenomenal job.
Yeah, the Bears are the 4th team on my list, Tony. So here's my last one. I think you're 1,000% right about everything you said there with the Bears. I like what the Colts did. And look, Anthony Richardson, take it or leave it, whatever you think about the guy. That's not even why I love the Colts draft, is because everything they did after Anthony Richardson, right? Julius Brents is a really talented cornerback. Maybe pick 44 is a little bit rich, but the tools are certainly there for a team that's not necessarily competing for a Super Bowl this year. Get a guy you think is a high upside. I talked about Josh Downs already. I think he's a 2nd-round player, and he fits in. You know, they have 2 big receivers in Alex Pierce and Pittman Jr. Well, Downs is your perfect slot guy to play with those 2. So I love Downs there. They just lost Paris Campbell. He'll slide right into that spot. You mentioned Blake Freeland as a long-term, really athletic offensive tackle that needs to get stronger. I already mentioned Adetomiwa Adebawore at a Northwestern 4th-round pick. I think he's going to be at 3 technique right next to DeForest Buckner in the middle of that defense. He's going to be great. You mentioned Darius Rush, who I think has all the skills you want as a cover corner. They got him in round 5. He was a 3rd-round player for me. Will Mallory's a developmental tight end they got in round 5. I think Evan Hull's a good all-around running back as a day 3 pick. And then some people really like Jalen Jones, the corner out of Texas A&M. So I thought the Colts had a really nice weekend for a team that needed a lot of players. Their volume and quality, I think, was very, very strong.
They were the 4th team on my list of favorites. And
there we go.
This is everyone's going to grade this draft off of Anthony Richardson. And I tweeted about this, but you mentioned the 4th-round picks. You mentioned Darius Rush. You could see that they're building the seeds for a team 2 or 3 years down the road. They hope Richardson pans out, but if Richardson, whatever happens with him, they got a lot of good players.
And I got to mention my man Titus Leo out of Wagner on Staten Island, baby.
Yeah.
I call NEC games sometimes. Titus Leo, he's a little bit of a wild card there. He's got all the measurables you want.
Yeah, very explosive defender. I mean, he's got to learn to play in space. But when you watch him play, he's a relentless pass rusher, good athlete, and a guy with a nonstop motor.
All right, our final category here, Tony, and I hate to call it least favorite classes because we all these players succeed and these teams draft well. So I'm going to go to the Saints first. I just was not and I've never been a huge fan of how the Saints draft, and they continue to have success. So, they're a lot smarter than me, and they know what they're doing, and so my criticism probably, isn't fair. I just think for a team that lacks juice in a lot of ways, where, who are the game changers on that roster, where you go into a game against the Saints and you're like, I'm really scared of that guy. What am I going to do to stop him? I don't think they have those guys. Brian Brzee, I know he's a good player. I think he's a year or 2 away from being a complete defensive tackle. He does some pass rush skills now. I mentioned Foskey, who I thought was a little bit of a stretch. I think Kendre Miller's a good fit with Kamara, but again, he's not like a scary back. Saldiveri, I think, is a good, offensive lineman that'll be in the league for a while. Jake Hayner is a long-term quarterback. And then A.T. Perry, I thought, was a good reach pick. But, I would have liked to see the Saints step out of this draft with guys in the 1st or 2nd round. I'm like, all right, this brings some juice to the Saints. The NFC South is really winnable, Tony. I think that's the division that anyone can win right now. If you look at the talent throughout that with the 4 teams in the NFC South. And I just think the Saints could have done a little bit more to help them win that division this year. I just don't see enough firepower on that team, and I don't think they helped themselves in that regard in this draft.
And that's the Saints, right? Every time you think they're going to take a receiver, maybe take a quarterback, they take Cesar Ruiz, the center out of Michigan, who now plays guard. And this year they take, Nick Saldiveri, a good player, but does he really fit a need? I'm going to go with the Green Bay Packers. You kind of touched on them before. They take Lucas Van Ness. Lucas Van Ness kind of reminds me of the Rashawn Gary pick a couple of years ago, where they take a solid player, but what are they going to do with him now?
Very similar. Very similar.
They didn't have a screaming need as a pass rusher, and then they moved. Same thing with Gary, and then they moved them to a middle linebacker. Later on they took Colby Wooden in the 4th round. Colby Wooden is a guy who as a freshman, showed me a lot of ability at Auburn, but his game kind of leveled out. He never just stepped it up. You mentioned the situation, at tight end where they take tight ends basically back to back. They got Josiah DeGuire there, who's, I'm not a big fan of him, but they took him in the third round a couple of years ago. Jaden Reed, I mean, we'll have to wait and see. Was it worth taking Lucas Van Ness over Jackson Smith-Njigba? On my board, no. We'll have to see what the returns are in a couple of years.
All right, the other team I'll bring up, and it's funny, because actually like a lot of the players they picked, it's more I want to discuss what their draft strategy was, Tony, and that's the Detroit Lions. So
yeah.
I like Jahmyr Gibbs, but 12th. I like Jack Campbell, 18th.
Yeah.
I love Sam Laporta. He was my number 3 tight end. At 34 is fine. And then, Branchett, I think Branchett 45 is good. But then you mentioned Broderick Martin in the round 3. Kobe Swartz out of William and Mary in round 5. So I just thought, it's funny. This was almost, I felt like this was like the Dan Campbell, on steroids draft, not literally, but it was like, all right, Dan Campbell, what are you going to do? Running backs, linebackers, tight ends. Let's go and punch somebody in the mouth. And, I really think they needed a corner. And they got Brian Branch, but he's not an outside corner. He's a safety or a slot guy. So I actually like the players. So I'm not killing the draft class, but I think the players are really good, but they didn't draft guys at premium positions: safety, tight end, linebacker, running back. Right now, one of those 4 is a premium position. And I just feel like maybe they could have made a little bit more out of the picks that they had.
It's funny because I thought about this, and at the combine, I was introduced to their capologist, and they were all excited because they had 5 picks within the first 83, and then they made that trade after Devin Witherspoon was off the ball to get more picks, and they may or may not ever admit this, but I think it was, you know what, we're just going to take the players we want when we're called to the clock. We don't care where they're valued on the board, because these are going to be the players that they're going to help us. And we have all these picks, so we're going to have to use them. So we don't care about taking Jahmyr Gibbs at 13. We don't care about taking Jack Campbell at 18. We don't care about taking Broderick Martin in the 3rd round. We got these picks. We got to use them. We're going to take the players. That's my own opinion. I was not impressed at all with the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, yeah, everybody, Jay Flowers, great. The Baltimore Ravens' history of taking receivers in the 1st round has been horrendous. I mean, we can go Rashard Perryman, on Hollywood Brown. They seem, the way the Green Bay Packers seem allergic to selecting a receiver in the 1st round. It's almost like the Baltimore Ravens are addicted to taking a receiver in the 1st round. And it never pans out for them. And when you are constantly spending early draft capital on the same position and you don't hit, it could eventually, catch up to you, because, you look back and say, oh, we could have had this player, we could have had that player. So Zay Flowers, yeah, I mean, he's a terrific receiver. The Giants probably would have selected him if he was available to them. And he just gave Lamar Jackson that huge contract. You want to give him more weapons. But I just look at the history, and the history has not been good. Trenton Simpson, the thing about Ravens is they usually want smart, instinctive linebackers as well as athletic guys. And Simpson's not an instinctive guy. That's why he fell. And Tavius Robinson in the 4th round. Tavius Robinson, to me, is a dog. I mean, Tavius Robinson has all the ability in the world, yet he never produces. I mean, if somebody can light a fire under Tavius Robinson in Baltimore, they may, they may have something there, but the guys just never showed anything to me. They took 2 guys in the later rounds. The offensive tackle from Oregon, who I like a lot, but I think could have been a free agent, and he's not very athletic. And then they took Andrew Voorhees of USC, who, again, Andrew Voorhees, if you remember, hurt his knee during position drills at the combine. He's not going to be playing next year. So maybe they're looking to the future for that. But, the Ravens should be in a win now mode. And with Zay Flowers, maybe, I just don't know.
And by the way, we were doing this right as the draft winds down, folks, so we can have it up as soon as it's over. But I'll just throw one other, and I'm done with my least favorite classes, Tony. You can throw one more in if you want. You talk about value. The Jets getting Zach Kuntz in round 7. you watch his tape, Tony, and look, he's got a lot to learn. He's raw, but his athleticism shows up on tape. To get him in round 7, that to me is an absolute steal. Just put. I also love the Vikings getting Dwayne McBride, UAB running back in round 7. I thought both those picks were really, really good value late.
And both of those guys fell because of injuries. That's why both of those guys fell. Kuntz was not. McBride had a recent injury. Kuntz was injured during the season and missed half the season. Yep. Kuntz came into the season highly graded by scouts, was okay during the season, was had his moments at Shrine Bowl practice, then knocked it out of the park during the combine. So you know that upside is there. He's just got to stay healthy and really become a complete player at the position.
All right, Tony, anything to add before we say goodbye?
That's it. I mean, the only thing I'll add is, we talk about this, favorites, not favorites, who did well. It's all on paper. We really won't know until 2 or 3 years down the road. I know people want to know 2 or 3 weeks into the 2023 season, but you got to give it time. You got to see what happens.
Wow, you're giving people to the regular season before they start making opinions? First preseason Hall of Fame game, Tony. Decisions will be made very early and unfairly to all these young men who are going to try to carve out NFL careers for themselves. Good stuff, Tone. Guys, we'll be back on Tuesday with our final wrap-up of the draft. We'll go through team by team. We probably won't spend as much time on some of the teams we really talked a lot about today because we did it already. And then we'll have our look at the 2024 coming your way a week from Monday right here a week from Tuesday, rather, on draft season. For Tony Pauline, I'm John Schmelk. Thank you so much for being with us on this episode of Draft Season. Hope you enjoyed the draft and all of our coverage. We'll see you on Tuesday, everybody.